Okay, so from here we've got to just keep going. We're going to try to flip some more lotus tiles as quickly as we can, because if we leave it a bit too long, then what we'll find is that our insecurities will build up. Right now we're in a good spot where we've quieted some of our insecurities about the other people in the group. So now we just need to make sure that we get enough quiet before the insecurities start building up again. So the best way to do that is just to complete these quests so that we can have a little time where we we're generating a lot of quiet. I cannot pick up new quests at this time, but that's okay. A trader might be a good idea, but I think what I'll do is I'll just put more camps onto building this wonder. That'll knock out 3 quests right there, so that's a big help. This view on Congress that we set up contains some points on Churchill, so we can get both of that done at once. This is Frankopan on Hobbes. Only a European author could have concluded that the natural state of man was to be in a constant state of violence, and only a European author would have been right. Said. This one, perhaps there's no nation on earth equal to the British in the capacity for self-deception. British historians write almost as if Britain had introduced Negro slavery solely for the satisfaction of abolishing it. You'll see this a lot, by the way. You'll see a lot of people who talk about Britain and slavery and really only bring up the time where they abolished it. Right? But again, this is where I like that Malcolm X quote, right? About how if somebody sticks a knife in your back, it's not enough. If somebody sticks a knife 9 inches in your back, it's not enough for them to pull it out 6 inches. They need to pull it out all the way. They need to heal the wound before things are done. And that's the thing about their anti-slavery stuff. I mean, they only ever pulled out the knife 6 inches, if that. Slaves, like millions of people, had their lives upended because of the slave trade, and the effects of it are ongoing today. To say we've made it illegal and we are going to try to keep other people from doing it, that's only worth so much, especially when it was also replaced by the indentured servitude shipping. The death rate of people shipped from places like Tamil Nadu to the West Indies, the death rates there were higher than that of the slave ships. And there are very important distinctions between indentured servitude and slavery, but I think people don't really understand how bad indentured servitude was as well. You saw women being given to men during the indentured servitude, right? You saw what was indisputably sexual slavery, and it's one of those things which just doesn't get talked about enough. The stories just aren't there to a sufficient degree. But of course, having said that, it's not like the stories of slavery are talked about enough either. I read this piece once. I think it was in the I forget where exactly it was. I think in the Times, where they were talking about. There was a story of this very young black girl who had been enslaved. And I think what she did was she took a piece of candy, and then the slave owner, the woman of the house, asked or forced this child to sit with her head under the rocker of a chair and then rock the chair over and over again, while the daughter of the house um, essentially whipped this poor little girl over and over again. And of course, this girl died as a result of all of that. But this is the thing. We often talk about slavery in terms of like big picture things, in terms of numbers, and we abstract away just how cruel it was on an individual level. And I mean, the same is true for colonialism, the same is true for most things. But it's one of those things where every time you read one of these stories, you're just kind of shocked at what things were, and I mean, what things still are in many places. Yeah. So let's see what our next set of facts are. It says Gandhi meeting Mussolini, where the two of them talked for 20 minutes, but the general knew no English at all. And this is Gandhi talking about Mussolini, right? His care of the poor, his opposition to superurbanization, his efforts to bring about coordination between capital and labor seem to me to demand special attention. I would like you to enlighten me on these matters. My own fundamental objection is that these reforms are compulsory. And this is another thing. I think in hindsight, of course, when we think of fascism as a whole, we think of Hitler, right? We think of the Nazi Party, and we think of World War II. But in the run-up to World War II, Mussolini had been around for longer than Hitler. And Mussolini was something of a celebrity in politics. More than just the leader of Italy, he was representative of a bold new direction in politics to a lot of people. He was very fashionable. I think that's the right word, and that's a thing that people kind of forget, especially given that Italy felt like something of a punchline during World War II itself. But he was very fashionable across the world stage. And so a lot of people would go and meet him trying to understand this new style of politics that he supposedly represented. And that, of course, included Gandhi. And where one of the places where this becomes particularly meaningful is that I think with Churchill, people see that he identified the threat of the Nazis before everyone else. That's a lot of how he ended up being prime minister in the first place. He was known to be the person who rung the bells of alarm about the Nazi Party. But I think what people don't ask about that is, why did nobody listen, right? Like, why was this such a fringe belief that there's only one major politician talking about it? And I mean, there are a couple of things there, right? The first and possibly more important is that Churchill had just come off of doomsaying about the Government of India Act 1935, in which India had elections. He had claimed repeatedly that those elections would cause massive violence across India, and when that didn't happen, it made it harder to take him seriously about his next series of claims of massive violence. And of course, by the time, he was already something of a fringe character anyway, because he had committed himself pretty poorly in his liberal term under Asquith, where he was responsible for the Gallipoli disaster during World War One. He was responsible for reverting England to the gold standard, which is one of the causes of the Great Depression, especially in Britain. So he's not. He was never a deep thinker. I think even those most generous towards him would not accuse him of necessarily being someone who reasons things out and a master of cool, dispassionate logic. That's not who Churchill was. He was a boy. He was a child who craved adventure, right? And that was what brought about his success. That was also what kept people from taking him seriously throughout his career. But the other thing is just that these views had massive acceptance, right? This was a world founded on amongst other things, colonialism, and part of the upshot of that is, in order to maintain a colonial empire, you have to come up with rationalizations for colonialism. And the only way you can rationalize colonialism is by imagining the colonized to be subhuman. So once you're imagining the colonized to be subhuman, then where is the line, right? It becomes meaningless to draw lines. So, oops. Didn't realize I was putting together a view on Ambedkar, which is always good. Always glad to do that. Thought I was putting together a view on the Congress. But anyway, so we'll see something like Mussolini repressing the Italian people, but if we go through the history of India under Britain, we'll see every bit as much repression, right? We see non-violent protesters get massacred in Jallianwala Bagh. We see imprisonment without trial over and over again. There is no rule of law per se in India because the entire colonial structure is built on the idea that some people are people and some people are not, right? So in this context, it's natural to see how someone like Mussolini isn't immediately discarded as a reprehensible human being, as he should have been, but instead viewed as a legitimate political alternative, as something new and fresh. And of course, no matter what, you will always find people who believe that the world is really the plaything of the aristocrats, right? And they'll justify that to themselves about how they would do a better job of running the place, and how democracy is inconvenient, much in the way that you'll see, let's say, Silicon Valley billionaires right now trying to destabilize the American democracy, because again, right, like at the core of the American Silicon Valley billionaire idea, as was the case back then, it's just that some people are superhuman and some people are not. There's a very interesting fact here from Ambedkar. I don't know if we'll get to see it, right? This game gives you a very random set of facts, but there's one where he compares the Nietzschean idea of the Superman with the Hindu idea of Brahminicalism, right? Which again postulates that like some people are superhuman and the rest of the world needs to cater to them, and then that will be best for everyone. I don't know if I should be meditating that much. I just was a bit caught up in the history, so I didn't focus too much on the actual decisions I made. I think it's fine to do so. Basically, we have this one lotus tile here, And what I want to do right now is just spread this out a bit. That'll get us started on the inspiration economy, on the quiet economy, rather than using the industrial economy. And if I can get that started here, if I can get that started this early on turn 34 instead of like turn 50, that's going to be very useful. In the meantime, I will just use this unit to explore. I'm going to keep connecting up places with this unit. Let's move down here and build this road. Just move down here, see where that takes us. Let's explore these so that if somebody wants them, they're there. Harvest here. I'm probably going to end up disbanding that unit anyway. And explore here. So yeah, so you'll see a number of British aristocrats in the run-up to World War II essentially say that the best thing for Britain would just be to leave the people whom they viewed as born to the task of managing the country, if they would just leave those people to do it without the inconvenient proletariat as they viewed it. And this, of course, was supercharged by fears about communism, right? A lot of people, including Churchill, felt that the revolution was coming for Britain, and they were very worried about that, naturally. But this is why you'll see someone like Oswald Mosley was so popular for so long, especially amongst fashionable circles. Right, the rumor always was that the British royal family in particular was very sympathetic towards the Nazis. I mean, I've never looked that up, so I have no idea. But these things also, they go up and down the chain, right? Like, we're talking here mostly about Britain, right? And in this case, the British attitude towards their own proletariats. But this was also the case, this was also the view of many British people towards Indians as a whole, whom they viewed as unable to manage their own affairs and in need of the stern controlling of the British viceroys and whatnot. And then once again, this is also the view of many of the educated Indians who felt that, like, you could not trust government, you could not trust leadership to the Indian proletariat, whom they viewed as, again, uneducated and incapable of understanding the world. And then we can go one step further and say this was the view of many people towards the Dalit population of India, that they felt that people from marginalized castes were just incapable of managing their own affairs and were suited for nothing better than serving like caste dynamics, you know. With these, that's the thing. It's very easy to look at a lot of these and treat them as like unique events, I guess, as unusual, right? But people are people. Most of these things come from concepts fundamental to people, like, world over. And when we pretend that one group was uniquely evil, we do that as a way to dismiss, right? To say this didn't come out of people as people. This is just those people right there. And by doing so, what we also do is we make it so that we don't have to address the root causes. We're just looking at a very surface level thing. We can say, oh, those people were convinced by the speeches of Hitler or Savarkar or whoever, right? We can say that there was a bad person and so people did bad things. And then the answer is just, oh, we just can't have a bad person, right? But when we do this, we miss a lot of the context here, right? It is natural for the British to have dehumanized Indians because they were materially dependent on the dehumanization of Indians. It is natural for upper caste Hindus to marginalize Dalits because they benefit so greatly from this marginalization. They materially benefit from it. When you see the marginalization of Muslims in current India, economics plays a large part in it, right? I think one of the big things about the Modi government is that it represented the idea that the rising tide wasn't coming. I think for a long time the Indian consensus was that everyone is getting wealthier all the time, especially in the post-liberalization and globalization economy. What we saw the economy split, right? We saw inequality rise, and the people who are, of course, overrepresented in the Indian conversation, the people who form what is supposedly middle-class India, right? These are the people who benefited greatly from globalization, right? They benefit greatly from this wealth and from this like unequal rewards of liberalization and globalization. Let's go with this one. I'm going to try to keep my Ambedkar fact so that I can make another view on Ambedkar later. But so we get this big consensus that like life is better for Indians because the Indians who get to talk about whether or not life is better are benefited much more from liberalization and globalization, while simultaneously farmer debts increase, but no farmer gets a primetime news channel, you know, there's no farmer on Republic TV, right? And then what we were seeing was the trailing off of that, right? Because a lot of the economic explosion from liberalization and globalization, it came off the backs of cheap labor, right? Like something like Y2K, right, was huge for again, right, like educated Indians from privileged castes, right? Let's go with unrest. See, so here I can start a campaign to show dominance, but I don't want to do that. I'm just going to keep my meanness to myself with this campaign. But then this is also why there's so much hostility towards the underprivileged in India. It's because from the privileged, it's because they realize that they have done a disservice to the underprivileged. But what I was also saying is that when you see the Muslim persecution that the BJP pushes, one of the key things there is that is the economic side of it, right? They push for boycotts. You'll see a lot of pushes for economic boycotts of Muslims, right? And the idea here is that the pie is shrinking, right? That like the prosperity of India, the period of unchecked growth and all of that, that's in the hindsight, that's in the rear view mirror, you know, like the era of 8% sustained GDP growth year on year, that seems to be a thing of the past, right? And so I think one of the things you're seeing is people trying to claw more money out of the system and doing so at the expense of a marginalized community, right? Which is always going to be easier than clawing the money out of the already hyper-privileged, let's say, Ambanis and Adanis, right, who are doing very well from the BJP government. There's a piece where an author spent some time hanging out in the capitalist bro society of India. I don't really know how you would describe these people, but she spent some time hanging out with them, and one of her findings was that many of them were explicitly aware of the K-shaped economy, right? Explicitly aware that economic growth was such that the wealthy are getting much wealthier and the poor are getting much poorer. And even if in aggregate that works out to GDP growth, it does not do so for those who are already struggling to get by. Right? And she said that there were no illusions about this. People understood that this is how the economy works right now. That there were a number of people who could explicitly tell you this. And I think people tend to have a good understanding of how their money how their money works at the moment, even if they may not be able to give you the exact numbers or anything of that nature. I think they at least have an idea of what is going on. And I do think that a lot of the support for the BJP is just the idea that that people are trying to take a bad situation and make it worse for other people if it makes it better for them. Right? I think that a lot of the conversation around it tends to be that it is purely ephemeral, right? Purely non-tangible stuff. They just hate Muslims because they hate Muslims. They hate Muslims for religious reasons, which we can never really explain or understand. And I think that is true to some degree. I think that religion obviously does play a big part in the amount of hate that we're seeing. And I think that people do take actions based on religious beliefs, right? Which it can be hard to appreciate if you're not religious yourself. But I mean, religion is just very important to a lot of people. This is axiomatic, right? This is self-evidently true that religion is important to a lot of people, and people will make decisions based off religion. But I also think that it tends not to be the entire story, that it often is also a function of material concerns. But anyway, that's that lengthy digression aside, we're quite a bit further in. So you see we have a number of lotus tiles, right? We have 4 right now, and it's turn 40, so that's pretty early to start this. The fact that we've taken out all of the quests and campaigns right now means that we'll have a period where all of our citizens are producing even more quiet than normal. So with luck, we'll be able to flip a few more tiles out here. See, like that one right there. And we're just going to keep trying to do this. So we're going to do that by, we're just not going to explore these anomalies. So here's the thing, right? We're going to start getting inspirations regularly from these quiet tiles. And what we can do with these inspirations is complete quests, and we can even complete quests at sanctums instead. And that will generate a little extra quiet. We'll get that little burst of satisfaction. But I don't think we need to do this just now. I think we'll give that a little time first. Here we'll just keep connecting things. Similarly over here, we'll just connect up these camps. We're just exploring these for the other players. We'll give them that help. And since we're not doing anything much, we could meditate here, of course, and try to use that to push us over the top here. I think we'll do that. I think right now is a really good time to just meditate a bit more. We'll just try to spike a few more lotus tiles while we can. So we're just going to set a bunch of these to meditate. So what that does is that means for 3 turns it's not going to produce anything. But and that includes the default currencies. So it's not producing research either, and it's not producing currency. But but it will produce, the entire tile will produce quiet for those 3 turns, and at the end of it we should get an inspiration. So then we can use those inspirations to produce more quiet, and then we're good. So this playstyle is fundamentally very different from the default playstyle, right? We're ignoring a lot of the things that we could be doing. We're not growing at all, right? We're not normally in this phase. What we would do is we would build a lot of buildings to generate more production, right? We would industrialize our camps. So instead of these being these preserves, we would turn them into study camps or self-improvement camps or group camps, and then we would use those to build some buildings. We would get more and more production that way, right? We would try to expand our city a bit if we could, stuff like that, right? And we would be putting down a lot of buildings that would also increase our production. When you put down the sanctum that we've been building with inspirations, then the result of that is that you cannot place anything else on that tile. You cannot put any buildings or any improvements on that tile. So we're basically cutting off industrialization for much of this area. We're making it so that it would be hard to flip the switch once we've built the quiet tiles and turn it into a more industrialized region. Besides which, we kind of can't afford to industrialize either. If we look at Radha over here, let me see if I can show you this, but it looks like she has a tile that's over industrialized already. It's hard to see from here. It's hard to see through the fog of war, and it looks like Anupam might have one as well. So they are going to be polluting a fair bit. Yeah, you can see here. So you can see Anupam, for instance, she's industrialized the humor camp and she's industrialized the balance camp already. So those are all starting to produce pollution as is, and they will produce more pollution as the game goes by, as they increase their production there. So what we're trying to do really is just basically provide a counterbalance, right? Provide a part of the world which is not polluting to the same degree, which is staying more sustainable. And with that, we can hopefully make up for a lot of what the rest of them are doing. And that means that we don't get to choose things like what goes into the project, and we really just have less control over where things go for the rest of the game. But it's like that's the sacrifice you make, but the result is that things are much more sustainable. And see, look here, right? Like here we're looking at the report. So we've added 250, right? Which is one of the most. But that's 250 out of 975, right? Kiran by herself has already added more than we have, right? We don't need to be the person who is adding all of the stuff to the report. We don't need to be the person who is like keeping up with the demands of industrialization. We can just stay here doing our thing. We'll add what we add. We'll do what we do, right? We can't control it the way the other players can control it, but we'll see where we end up. And if we're the person who adds the least to the report, like, so be it, as long as, we manage to get through the entire project without everything falling apart. In the other game I played, in the previous playthrough that I recorded, the game became hopelessly polluted by turn 78 or something, somewhere around that. I mean, if you're not careful, it will happen. And that game, admittedly, I didn't even get to industrialize. That was the rough thing. It was a game that didn't really work out at all, so nothing happened. Okay, so here, this is an interesting thinking point. things are progressing fairly well with the Lotus tile, so I am actually going to start the campaign, which means that we'll be less quiet for a while. It's unfortunate, but we'll end up being closer to Kiran at the end of it than if we were to take the easy one. So we have one here and one down there. We'll leave that one for Kiran most likely. And we'll take a couple of inspirations, just move them there, and we'll call that. Might as well disband this, might as well disband that. If we need more later, we'll get more later. Just inspire here. That's answer on the world, that's great. Just move this one straight up. Okay, that's great. And we'll inspire here. So that's even given us a bit of liking of Radha, but that in turn is starting a little more unrest. So these are chaining, but we'll see. It should be quite doable. We have a lot of inspirations here. We should be able to just use them to finish off these quests. So there we go, that's done. We're just going to keep moving this. Let's see here. What we want to do is just keep connecting up these camps. It does mean that our production will increase, but it also means that we'll be like helping these other places keep quiet. Now this guy, this unit happens to be right here. I could just try to resolve this campaign with conflict, right? That's a kind unit, so it's not going to do so much damage. Let's see. I can't imagine this will work out well. I think that's not enough of a unit, but maybe it will, right? I'm not doing much with that unit anyway. So there we're just trying to use production to to finish a quest anyway. Well and good. We can put together a couple of views here. Let me just see this one. So this is on Kasturbai, so we might want to use that later. Yeah, this is talking about how difficult it was for Gandhi after his wife died. And then of course those are a couple facts about his own death. We'll just keep that. We've put these answers together. We may be able to add them to the report sometime soon, but we'll see when it works out. We're still only at 5 quests, which is good. So while we may not be producing the quiet we need to, we're also not producing any pollution at all. Which again, I can see that at least Anupam and Radha are starting to produce pollution already. And if we can just keep a nice quiet refuge, then we might be able to sustain anyway. And it looks like it. It looks like we're going to end up seeing a bunch more of these tiles flip, because once you start generating quiet and getting the Lotus tiles, then they produce quiet in the tiles next to them. So it spreads a bit. You can see it starts spreading across space. And I seem to have been dragged into a couple of campaigns, so that's tricky. Try to just finish those off as quickly as we can. Yeah. Okay, so this says these camps opposed to us. Again, I'm just going to try to use inspirations to finish these off. Right, that does a lot. It's non-violent, so it's not going to cause any pollution, it's not going to destroy any tiles, and it will actually grow the the camps that it's used on, and it'll help us stay quiet, which is really what we're trying to do. Just keep ourselves very calm. One thing Gandhi says about ahimsa and about nonviolence is that it's an all-sided sword. It benefits both the person using it and the person it is used against. And I think he's a little, I don't think that's fully true. I think that, for instance, when you saw him fasting to bring about the Pune Pact, right, that was just him using nonviolence in a coercive manner. He used it to force Ambedkar into doing what he wanted, right? But it is a philosophy that I tried to bring into this game, that there is a difference between using force and using other methods. So here what we're doing is we're saying these camps want things. So what we're going to do is we're going to help these camps get what they want, and in doing so we can get them to stop their opposition. We can assuage their concerns. And in doing so, and by doing that, we also help them grow, rather than tearing them down the way that would happen if we were to use, for instance, brutal units or devious units. Yeah. And again, right, it is still coercive. I do think that one of the things about Gandhi's fasts to death was that there was always the threat that if he were to actually die, then there would be massive violence, right? And you'll see people talk about this with the Pune Pact in particular, that if Gandhi were to die from his fast, then there would just be massive pogroms of Dalit communities by Savarna Hindus, and also that it would be a lasting brush with which the Dalit communities would be tarred. And of course, this is one of those things where the Hindutva groups managed to skate away from their culpability in that, right? Godse was Hindutva through and through. Godse was a member of the RSS, and nevertheless, somehow they get away without being painted as the murderers of Gandhi, despite the fact that he murdered Gandhi explicitly out of the ideology of Hindutva, right? That is the reason he murdered Gandhi, and that is that is very consistent with Hindutva as a whole. But rightfully so, the Dalit leaders of the time said that should Gandhi have died from his fast, that the Dalit communities would have been blamed, and that blame would not have gone away, right? Which is absolutely true, right? It just shows you the difference between how underprivileged groups are treated versus that of the majority group, right? That a Hindutva terrorist can kill Gandhi, and that is treated at most as the actions of an individual person. But should Gandhi have died from his own actions in response to a Dalit leader, then that would have been tarred all Dalits for quite a while. But anyway, so the key point here is that ahimsa is coercive and has been used coercively many times. But what that misses is that ahimsa demands a lot of the people who use it. There was a time where a number of priests were upset with Gandhi for his opening up a temple. There was a temple which was barred to the Dalit community, and he campaigned strongly to have that temple opened up. And so you saw a number of Savarna priests try to push back against this, and they just lacked the fortitude to fast for this, you know. So it's the fact that it is not, that it does demand sacrifice, that does very much change the nature of how it works, right? It means that you will not adopt a fast unless it is something where you have that conviction. Although, of course, this is tempered by the fact that, like, by the time Gandhi was a major figure, he was just so used to fasting, it clearly didn't mean as much to him as it did to everybody else. Right? Gandhi's mother would fast for religious reasons. And one of his enduring memories of childhood is all of the kids begging the mother to eat something. And she would just go out and look at the sky, and if she didn't see the moon, as would often happen if it was just a cloudy night or whatever, she would say that it wasn't time to break her fast and go back in, despite all of these kids begging her to break it. And I mean, you can see here how scared Gandhi was as a little child, right? Which is one of the things that, again, he does abstract away, that it is a massive demand on the people around him. You can see the fear of the little child who just wants to make sure his mother is well. And you can see how that stuck with him for so long. But anyway, so he was, of course, much more capable of fasting than the average person. But it is telling that those Savarna priests, they had so much to say about why the temple couldn't be open to the Dalit community, but they just were not willing to put themselves on the line in the way he did regularly. It makes it hard to see them as, it makes it hard to trust in their conviction when they are asking others to sacrifice without making any sacrifices themselves. But anyway, so right now we seem to have a lot going on. Just take care of it one by one. And so you see, we're actually doing stuff. You know, we've built a couple of wonders through inspirations. We've developed relationships this way, and all of this in addition to just completing our quests. Yeah. And that's one of the points I wanted to make, that you can work in a more sustainable manner. You know, like we'll often, especially in video games, right? Video games is one of the biggest places that you'll see this, but we'll often push ourselves harder and harder to get work done, right? We just keep saying, oh, if I can just put in some more time, some more effort, then I'll get the work done. And then naturally you burn out, right? And it becomes harder and harder to work, and then you get to a point where you just don't want to look at the work, right? Just looking at the work makes you tired and upset. And I think with especially, you know, I work alone, right? It's just me working here. So there's a lot of I write out a bunch of things that I want to get done. And then I always put more work on the week than I'm really capable of doing because I want to get all the work done. And then I don't finish it and I feel bad, and I push myself to work more. And you know, in pushing myself, I make some short-term decisions. I say, I'm tired, but I'm just going to work here. I skip doing some of the stuff that I want to do. I just don't have the downtime. And it's A, you burn out. A, it's not sustainable. But B, it's not even necessarily what you need to do. That's the point I'm trying to make with a lot of this game, that you can actually that if you give yourself the time to be quiet, right, to let things simmer down a bit, then you'll find yourself often like doing things in better ways, just doing things that you might not, maybe doing things in ways that are more elegant and less brute force, right? And that's what you get a lot of with these inspirations, that instead of going through the brute force way of I'm going to choose the wonder, I'm going to choose where to build the wonder, I'm going to assign all of these people towards making the wonder, and I'm going to think about what wonder I want and all of that. You just let an inspiration go to the quest, and you'll get what you get. You know, sometimes it's the wonder you want, sometimes it's not the wonder you want, right? But whatever it is less under your control, but you're still getting stuff. That's the key thing, that it's not that you're remaining in incomplete stasis. It's not that you give up on the idea of doing your job, you know. You're just focusing on different things. You're just letting it come from below. That's really the crux here. That rather than forcing out what you want, you're letting your body tell it to you. You're letting your subconscious tell it to you. Okay? So yeah, things are definitely going along. We've got a decent chunk of quiet right now across the space. This one is fun because if we can spread this into Rava, that'll give her a source of quiet that she can use for her stuff, right? And so she'll get her own inspirations that she can use to complete her stuff, and it'll just help her offset the loudness of her industrialization. Yeah, so what we'll be doing in the next set is trying to get this to spread even more, right? Really, that's all we're doing. We're just tending our area, trying to keep as much as quiet as we can. We'll finish off these quests and hopefully that won't take very long. Finish off this campaign, just try to get back to not having any pressures on us, you know, no pressure of completing these quests, of managing these campaigns, just staying quiet, right? That's the real thing. Just wanting less, aiming for less, letting more come from below rather than trying to dictate so much from above, right? So I'll see you in the next one.